Hi, welcome to our podcast. I'm Dolly.
And I'm Jolene.
And we're here to weird you out.
With sex.
We recorded the episode you're about to hear over 2 years ago.
The audio is rough. This was before we had access to better tech.
You'll notice we have recorded new names over old audio to protect privacy.
Yeah, we really don't want our moms to hear this.
Or our bosses.
It was our first time, so please be gentle with us.
There aren't many content warnings for this episode, but be advised, there was some terrible sex.
All right, enough foreplay. On with the main event.
Welcome to the Womanly Portal podcast.
On this podcast, we discuss explicit books in explicit detail.
And we say fuck a lot.
Listener discretion is advised.
This podcast is not for people under the age of 18.
On with the show. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the Womanly Portal podcast.
The first Womanly Portal podcast episode.
The first episode. I couldn't
come up with a synonym. The first Womanly Portal.
It's already off to a great start.
The first time is always a little awkward, folks.
Please be gentle with us.
I'm Dolly.
And I'm Jolene.
And we're here to weird you out.
With sex.
Book sex, to be specific.
Book sex. Not our sex. Oh my god, no.
Today we will be discussing a wonderful Tessa Dare novel called...
Wonderful is a really strong term.
A wonderfully hilarious, once commentary is added, novel by Tessa Dare called When a Scot Ties the Knot. Now, you didn't mishear me. It's just a random Scot, but it is the knot, the only knot. So this should be good. It's part of a Castles Ever After series, although I have never seen another book under this series.
Oh, I totally have. I think I've read like 2 or 3 from the series. Let me see.
Oh, no, you're right. We read all of them.
Wait.
They were very memorable.
God. Did we? Okay, so I know that we've definitely read number 1, which is Romancing the Duke. Did we read Say Yes to the Marquess?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't think I read Say Yes to the Marquess, but we definitely read Romancing the Duke, and it was like a trip. And when a Scot ties the knot, as you will hear, dear listeners, is an extra trip and a half. It's a plot, and it goes somewhere. I'm just not sure quite where.
To the Womanly Portal podcast.
Through the Womanly Portal.
So, this dear book is about a girl who, to avoid having to go through the being presented to court and doing the season of courting or whatever it is that they did in Victorian English age, she makes up a sweetheart that she met on vacation, and she writes letters to him, who is a Captain Logan
Mackenzie,
thank you.
Did you forget?
Yes, I did. I wrote down the list of everything she calls him throughout the book, and I can't wait to get to that. Hold on. So her name is Maddie Churchill.
That's right, Madeline Churchill.
And she writes him for 5 years, and then she decides to kill him off. Now, if you're wondering why she kept posting letters for 5 years, I don't have an answer for you. But it turns out that this Logan
Mackenzie
is a real man. He is really Scot. He was really in the army. And he shows up on her doorstep another 5 years later to claim her as his wife. And then they pretend to be enemies and then they become lovers, Natch.
They don't pretend to be enemies. He, like, blackmails her.
Yeah, but she wants to jump his bones the whole time.
That's true. They be enemies who are, like, really horny for each other.
Yeah, they're enemies the way that you would be an enemy in a tickle fight with
Johnny.
So
Excuse me.
we should edit that out.
No, there's no editing in this podcast.
Maddie's personality is she's shy and has a ton of social anxiety. She draws, and apparently she writes to fictitious men.
That is about the sum of her personality. Oh, the anxiety disorder. Did you mention the anxiety disorder?
Yeah. Socially awkward is what I categorized it as, because they don't explain, like, the root cause of her intense shyness until, like, farther in the book, where they clearly make it into, like, a traumatic response. And then it turns out that it's linked to, like, her getting stuck in
Trampled by a horse.
Yeah, not a horse. She was stuck in a crowd that panicked, and she was a little girl, and she was, like, trying to get away. But then it was that she had snuck out, and she got back to the house eventually, and her father came in the room, and she thought she was getting in trouble, and instead he was like, hey, your mom's dead. So
Yeah.
she just, like, has a lot of trauma in crowds. But I did want to bring up this. So the fictitious Logan Mackenzie that she writes ends up being functionally exactly who he is, at least physically.
Yeah, like as if every Scottish person known to man and also the imagination looks exactly the same. He looks just like his description. So much so that her Aunt Thea, like, recognizes him immediately and is like, oh, a Scottish man with brown hair and brown eyes. You must be Captain Logan Mackenzie, who I think is dead.
Let me read this little paragraph. Logan Mackenzie. Suddenly, her not real suitor had a name. By the end of the afternoon, he had a hair, brown, eyes, blue, a voice, deep, with a Highland burr, a rank, captain, and a personality, firm, but intelligent and kind. His personality is described as firm. And I get that she's trying to say, like, he is firm, as in, like, not wishy-washy. But when she describes his personality as firm, I can't help but think of buns. So that's
His
all.
personality is just his ass. Which,
Firm.
I mean, with the amount that she, like, talks about his ass, I mean, that could have been what she meant at 14, too, you know?
Yeah. But also, like, they do talk about how chiseled he is.
All the fucking
So-
time.
Yes. And the other thing that you figure out is when Maddie grows up, she makes a career out of illustrations, which she always draws, and she likes to draw nature. And so she gets hired to, like, draw different beetles or lobsters. So she has 2 lobsters as pets, and she's documenting their life cycle, which weirdly becomes a metaphor for this couple throughout the book.
Like, it's such a prolonged and serious metaphor that, like, you could just read the plot of The Lobsters and that's the plot of the book. Like, it follows the story, the love story for Maddie and Logan to a T, and it's really confusing and, like, weird. And it's like, I get it if you make, like, the reference one time, but then for it to be, like, closure at the end of the book is what happens to the fucking lobsters. Like, okay, that's cute and kind of kitschy, but, like, also just weird angle is, like, we're really concerned about these 2 lobsters getting it on.
Yes. And it creeps everyone out. The way that, like, honestly, their entire relationship should creep them out. But, like, everything about this is so weird.
Yeah.
So functionally, we get a prologue that's like the 10 years, where for 5 years she writes to him, then she kills him off, and so for 5 years everybody thinks he's dead.
Yeah.
And then he shows up. So they have like 10 years of history, quote unquote history.
Yeah.
And then she
she's inherited a castle at this point from her
Yes.
like godfather.
Yes.
Who was like, I want you to have a home for you and your future husband to live in his homeland of Scotland. So I bought a castle and I'm leaving it to you in my will, and when you guys get married you can have it. So then when she kills off her pretend Logan Mackenzie because she feels all guilty for lying to her family for the last like 5 years, her godfather still keeps it for her in her will, and he dies and she gets the fucking castle and she just moves there.
Yes, which is where the real Logan Mackenzie shows up to visit her to start this.
She had written about it in one of her letters.
Yes. So he shows up on page 17, and this is a 376-page book, just so all of our readers know. Readers, all of our listeners know.
It was about an 8-hour listen, I think.
Yes, but the rest of the book is over the course of just over 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, no, now that you mention it, yeah, it's like a really short plot.
It's 2 weeks, yes. And so here's when they're introducing, this was one of my favorite lines about Logan Mackenzie, so you can learn more about him. This wasn't just a man. This was a man.
In italics.
That's all. Yeah.
That's
all.
That's pretty much description as you need, really. Because that's like his entire personality throughout the book. Apart from just being firm in the buttocks, they just talk about how manly he is, like, all the time.
Yes, but they go back and forth between he's not just a man and he's just a man the entire book. It is regularly mentioned throughout the entire book that he is a man or just a man or not just a man, but he is a man the entire book.
So he shows up and he's all like, hey, so I know you weren't expecting to see me because you think I'm pretend and also pretend dead, but I did get all those letters. It was like a whole thing. They just kept getting delivered to me because I was apparently the only Logan Mackenzie in the whole goddamn British Army, and even though you didn't put an address on any of those letters at all, they still got delivered. And I don't know why you thought that those letters just disappeared somewhere and didn't think about where they went, but hello. And I, like, basically have every right to the land that you're living on because I'm Logan Mackenzie and I got your letters. Like, that's really it. And she's like, no, I don't know who you are. Get out of my house. And he's like, I have all those letters you wrote me, and a lot of them are really embarrassing, and they'll expose you for the liar that you are. So I'm blackmailing you now because I've got 5 really, really traumatized soldiers out there whose families are all dead and they all need houses. So yeah, I'm gonna be the lord of a Scottish castle now, and you're just gonna have to marry me and fuck me and deal with it. And she's all like, man, he got me there. I guess I'm gonna have to do all of that, or else I'll be exposed as a liar to my family. And those are definitely equal consequences. So that's like the whole setup for the book.
Right. Well, it's a lot harder to feel like you're being blackmailed into marriage when you definitely want to squeeze his firm personality.
Yeah, she's all about that firm personality from like the moment he walks in. It helps that he's definitely not wearing anything underneath that kilt that wouldn't have... Okay, I did look this up.
You did.
He would have worn the kilt as part of his like dress uniform.
Naturally.
But like as everyday wear for this time period, like I had to use context clues to discover what time period it was, but since she says Pride and Prejudice is her favorite novel, it would have to have been after 1819, and like at least...
What? Did you figure out what war? There had to be an actual war.
Oh,
I don't right?
fucking... Probably.
Okay.
But like there would have been Scottish soldiers, and in the late 1700s there was this whole law put into place where Scottish people weren't even allowed to wear kilts. It was like outlawed because England ruins people's cultures for them. So then people just kind of stopped wearing the kilt altogether because you weren't allowed to, and it just fell out of fashion. So then that was overturned like 10 years later, and they started wearing just like not big over the top great kilts, but just like regular what we think of today kilts again sometimes. But like these men wear their kilts in the way that people wore great kilts. Like, they are their functional only piece of clothing, blanket, bedding, everything. So it's not actually accurate, but he does walk in wearing a kilt. He only ever wears the kilt and like a t-shirt. That's like his whole thing.
Sometimes not a t-shirt. Dear friends, if you would like to look up the cover of this book, you will find that he only wears the kilt. No t-shirt.
She has such a Scot fetish. She is like all about fetishizing the kilt, man. And it's like if I were him, I'd be kind of like, hey, my eyes are up here actually. Could you not stare at my legs anymore? Please? She's weird about it.
Yeah. I think he takes pity on her because there's a really good paragraph on page 55 which threw me. So, but beneath that shyness and reserve, she possessed a natural, earthy sensuality.
Earthy?
He couldn't help. He couldn't help but what that might mean in bed. That feels like that, like when you get a fortune cookie, the joke where you're supposed to add in bed afterwards. He couldn't help but think of what that might mean in bed, when all the rules and corsets were shed. Wow, it rhymes. And the dark freed her from her propriety.
Her propriety. Ew.
Propriety. Nothing sexier than being freed from your propriety.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing about Regency era novels anyway, right? Is like, yeah.
Yes.
So I get that as a sexy thing. Like, this thing that's sexy about Regency era romance fiction is like, there's all of these rules and regulations, but they're gonna break them anyway because they're just super, super fucking into each other.
Yes. That's what I've noticed with all of these, like, period novels. Every single one of them seems to be, like, men think women are all the same, and it's because they're all forced to be, socialized the same. And then they meet one woman who's like, well, I'm not gonna follow these, like, societal expectations with you. And they're like, she's just not like other girls. She is. They all have personalities.
I'd really actually like to give you a blowjob, even though I'm not supposed to because propriety says so. Oh my god, your personality is so fun.
My favorite trope, which was also in this book, is with these period pieces, there's always, like, especially when the female was like the virgin and all of that, there's this moment where he wants to go down on her. And every time she's like, what would possess you to lick it?
What would make you even think of putting your mouth on my pussy lips?
And then the next scene, like the next sexual experience, without fail, she's like, let me deep throat your entire cock.
She's like, she was just so curious about what it would be like to have that entire wiener shoved down her throat.
And I don't know, maybe that is the natural response, and that's what everyone else in their, like, sexual awakening has experienced, where they're like, why would you...
I don't know, have you had that experience?
No, but how quickly they go from, like, how dare you lick me there, to, like
let me put
shove it down my throat,
mouth,
daddy.
Like, I just have to say, like, the first time I gave a blowjob, I was more just like, I don't know, do you actually want me to put that in my mouth? Like, I don't know why you want. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what you want. And then he was like, no, it's like, it's just like how you eat a popsicle. And I was like, but I bite popsicles. And he was like, okay, well, that's enough of that. Let's try something else. And I was like, oh, mean.
I mean, this idea that, like, every single time these, like, virtuous, innocent women are touched, they always orgasm. And I get it. That is the point.
Like, at the very beginning.
Yes. Like,
yeah, the orgasm is what we're reading for. We're definitely reading to hear the orgasms. But virgins don't. I mean, maybe we're just unlucky. Maybe we're just really unlucky, but I don't know if I've ever talked to any woman, or I shouldn't say that. I don't think I've ever talked to a person with a vagina who had an orgasm their first sexual experience.
Just when you paused, you were like, I don't think I've ever talked to a woman.
I don't think I've ever actually talked to a woman. Dolly, are you a woman? This is our first time talking.
I'm so honored.
Jolene.
I'm so honored to be your first female
My first?
conversationalist.
You're just honored to be my first.
Okay, so this was one of my favorite descriptions, which is supposed to be like adding to like the sexual tension or whatever. So it's from the perspective of Captain Mackenzie, and he goes, her lashes gave a coy flutter. So this is what she turned into, given the smallest scrap of power over him, a saucy flirt. Damned if he didn't like it. So I asked Jack, that is my partner, for new listeners, the few that we get.
They're all new listeners.
like,
it's our first episode.
Touche. So I was like, hey babe, if I fluttered my eyelashes coyly at you, would that do it for you? Would you like that? And he's like, no. And I was like, why wouldn't you? And he said, I don't think I would notice. And I was like, you wouldn't notice? And he was like, no, I wouldn't. Also, I don't know what it means to flutter your eyelashes coyly at me.
He just doesn't even know what you mean. So how does he know if you don't try and he doesn't know what you're talking about, then how does he know that it wouldn't do it for him? It might be like the ultimate boner juice for him.
Tune in next week, listeners.
You'll report back and let us know.
I absolutely will.
I have to say, so when I was growing up as a child, and I should clarify, this is my grandmother who is genuinely just a horrible human being. And most of my experiences with her were one version or another of emotional abuse. She taught me, starting at age like 5 or 6, that if I wanted something, particularly like from my grandfather, I should go up to him and say like, Grandpa, can I have a chocolate bar, pretty please? And then flutter my eyelashes. Like that was the thing that she trained me to do to like get what I want. So when in books, things like that happen, like she fluttered her eyelashes coyly, I'm like, ew, that's like a thing you do to your grandpa. Don't do that. Or it just sounds like a manipulation tactic. It's like, oh, you're just trying to get something.
The dick.
The D. She's trying to get the D.
She's trying to get the big D.
But okay, that is something we have not mentioned yet. Logan and Maddie do get married like that very same night. But they don't get married. They get traditional Scottish hand-fasted. And they keep saying, like, this is, like, technically not being married because there's no paper involved. But if we fuck, then it is legally binding. So she's like, so you mean there's a way to get out of it? And so she won't fuck him. So, like, the whole book, she's like, no, I'm not gonna fuck you until we figure out a different way to resolve this situation. There has to be a different way for us to resolve the situation other than sexual blackmail. And he's just like, no, just let's go to Pound Town. That's all we have to do. You obviously want to go to Pound Town. I know you're curious because you're a virgin. And she's all like, yeah, I'm damn well. Yeah, I'm curious and I want to go to Pound Town, but I'm not going to go to Pound Town until after we figure out how to not go to Pound Town to solve our property dispute. And then, spoiler alert, they go to Pound Town, but not until later. So, like, the whole time she's just being, like, a total, like, cock tease, because she's like, well, we could just, like, masturbate next to each other instead. And he's like, yeah, okay, I guess.
Okay, so before they mutual masturbate, there's this one scene where he's trying to get her into bed, and he opens her first shift, like her nightgown, right? Mm-hmm. And he realizes that she's wearing
oh my
two.
God, yeah.
And she says, I put the inner one on backwards just as an extra layer of defense. That would explain why he can't find another row of buttons. But you did not trust me? I cannot stand the Scottish written in accent.
You did not trust me? You mean like that?
It's super inconsistent, and we will get to that right after this scene.
Oh my God,
because it is ridiculous across the board.
So ridiculous.
But she responds, I didn't trust myself, she said. It seems like I was right not to. Look at me. Logan didn't know whether or not to be offended by this strategy or impressed at her cleverness. She created her own virgin armor. She put on 2 nightgowns.
She put on 2 nightgowns.
Pull them the fuck up.
But that's just like basically a chastity belt.
It's virgin armor.
Oh my god.
She's ready to go into virgin battle.
So she's like constantly doing this to him, right? She's like putting pillows between them on the bed, and he's like pissed off about that, so he sleeps on the fucking floor, and she wears the 2 nightgowns, and she stops him when he's like making out with her, because she'll like make out with him because she is a curious virginal creature, but no PNV, you know, or else she ends up in a legally binding marriage somehow. So
yes, but he also does things where he's trying to like reduce her inhibition or whatever, or like make her just like so wanton crazy for him or whatever, that she's like, okay, I'll be your wife forever, just fuck me now. And one of my favorites, I literally put in the post-it note in the book as finger guns, which is where he makes her fuck herself on his fingers, which like it was written fine, I guess. Fine.
Like,
but I could not stop laughing at the idea that, like, it was not that he was exactly, like, he was not doing most of the work. He, like, got all set up, and then he was like, you do it. Get yourself off on me. So he's just providing his hand. And I don't know, why would she need the D if she can just ride 2 of his fingers into oblivion? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he himself had that whole line where he's like, oh, man, I wonder if I could find it.
Tell me what it is.
Okay, and this is going to involve me attempting Gaelic, which I can't promise to be any good at because I learned how to pronounce this from the audiobook. So, Captain Logan Mackenzie says, or she says, he spread the linen tight over her hips, revealing the dark triangle of shadow guarding her sex, and then he bent to kiss her there. She flinched and bucked, bashing him in the head with her knee. Ouch! With a low moan of pain, Logan rolled to the side, clutching his head. He stared up at the bed's wooden canopy, struggling for breath. Had he been wondering what she was doing to him? He knew what she was doing to him. She was killing him. That's what she was doing to him. What? She clutched the bed sheets to her chest. Why would you do that? Why, indeed. Because humans have more imagination than lobsters, mon frère. There's more than one way to share pleasure. And, like, they reference that a bazillion times, that humans have more imagination than lobsters, and that there's more than one way to share pleasure. And so she just keeps being like, well, I mean, you're the one who said that there's more than one way to share pleasure, so why don't we just keep doing other things than P&V so that the hand fasting's not legally binding? And he's like, God damn it! Dug myself into a hole with that, like, trying to give her oral sex thing.
Got him.
Also, mourir. I don't know how to say that. I looked it up on the internet.
Rolling right into that. The inconsistency of the Scottish accent drives me
so bad.
Crazy. So my favorite piece is in a conversation where he's asking why she never sent a drawing of herself to a man that she did not realize was real.
Right. She was just drawing sketches in the margins of her letters.
And she was like, well, the thought never occurred to me. The thought never occurred that she was writing to a real person either. So, like...
Yeah.
So he was like, why did you never send a drawing of yourself? She paused, surprised. I don't know. I suppose the idea never occurred to me, but... Are you saying the idea occurred to you? And he says, of course it did. I'm a man, amn't I? Am not conjoined. Amn't I?
Amn't I? I'm a man, amn't I? And it's just, that was the worst version of a Scottish accent I've ever fucking done. I'm so sorry. That was a hate crime. I'm a man, amn't I? And it drove me crazy the first time I heard it in the audiobook. And the second time I heard it in the audiobook, I was like, that wasn't a fever dream. That was really written in this book. Tessa Dare really thinks that Scottish people talk like that. That's like a cartoonish version of the Scottish accent. Like, I know that the Scottish accent has a lot of the vurras that she drops in and stuff like that, but Ammentai?
But it's so inconsistent because he will say, I'm just a man. But then he'll switch to, I'm a man, Ammentai. That one time, the only time in the whole book. Like, at least be consistent with your dumb fucking
it's just like
accent. So here is something that I found just for you.
Oh, thank you.
So here's some background.
I hope it's okay to share with the listeners.
Jolene and I bonded over terrible romance books, which is the birth of the little seedling of this idea, the coy eyelash flutterings, if you will, where we started this entire podcast. So I found this line in this book, and I have been saving it. I purposely did not text you this comment because I needed you to respond to it in
okay I'm listening
organically, right?
Orgasmically, got it.
So for background information, one of the first things that Jolene told me that she always noticed in books where is for some reason with oral sex, they always describe the taste of the other person's genitals, and it sounds like they're either describing like a fine wine or
like
a perfume.
Yes. Yeah. Like a perfume commercial, but for pussy.
So here we go. Holy God, she tasted of ambrosia, like peaches and blossoms and honey and musk, and just a touch of salt to make it the most unbearable sweetness, even sweeter still.
I just don't think my pussy juice has ever tasted like peaches.
It changes the Justin Bieber song immensely.
It's just like peaches and blossoms and musk.
Honey. Don't forget honey.
And just a hint, and honey, and just a hint of salt. Yeah, it's like, okay, are you mixing up like a Dior perfume that I won't be able to stand because it smells too much like my grandmother? Or are you mixing up the world's worst oatmeal? Pick one.
Oatmeal.
Yeah, it's Odie pussy. And I'm like,
Odie.
Is it because, like, there's no way to really describe pussy juice without just being like, it's kind of fishy and salty? And that doesn't sound very romantic. Is that the thing?
It is weird that, like, the description, like, I mean, a lot of people really enjoy the taste, I guess. But,
sure.
like, it is weird that they have to make the description sound like
she is the most amazing, delicate, beautiful woman on earth because her pussy juice tastes different from every other pussy juice on the face of the earth.
It reminds me of when people describe wines. They're like,
it's so nutty.
Monty.
It's got a little bit of fruit in there probably, and legs for days.
Is that an underscore of chocolate I taste?
I'm like a pussy sommelier.
Yes, that's okay. So, and then it goes on to, he went slowly running his tongue up and down the full length of her slit, teasing.
Ugh, I hate that term.
Tasting, enjoying the hitch of her quickening breathing, feeling the little tremors in her thighs, savoring the perfect softness of her most intimate places. I bet that would have been way sexier if I didn't giggle.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that line is pretty sexy, but the thing that is so weird about it is the, like, having to imagine that he's actually tasting peaches and, like, rose blossoms in there. Like, you're not.
Like, ma'am, please stop putting honey up your vagina. It is probably not good for it.
Oh my God, you know what that reminds me of? Okay, so you know how people are always like, if you eat, like, certain foods, then, like, your cum will taste better? Like the pineapple thing? Okay, so back when Johnny and I had broken up for the first time, my mom was, like, really trying to hook me up with people, and she came back from the grocery store one day and was like, you will never guess, but I saw the cutest guy at the grocery store. And I was like, that's weird. You're married. And she's like, not for me, for you. And you know what else? He was buying like 8 pineapples. And you know what they say about pineapple. And I'm like, hey, Mom, you're my mom. Don't say things like that. Like, she totally wanted me to just date this guy because she thought his BJs would taste like pineapple. And she was like, if he has a girlfriend, he's really taking care of her. And I'm like, Mom, stop. Why do I need you to talk to me about this stuff? I don't. I was like 22 at the time.
Just a bartender. Like, he's like, I'm not
Yeah.
even eating any of these. I don't want acidy spit that hard.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know why that man had 8 pineapples, but I'm really glad you didn't ask him for his phone number for me based on the number of pineapples in his grocery
My
cart.
daughter loves pineapples. Can you give me your number
It's more
for
like-
her?
My daughter really likes giving BJs, but only if they're a little bit citrusy. Could I get your phone number for her? I promise
She
she's
loves
an adult.
acidy cum.
There's nothing better than like a pina colada straight out the dick. My God. Still one of the most embarrassing things my mother has ever done. And she
God.
didn't even ask him for the phone number. It was just the conversation.
Thank God that I already hate pina coladas because I don't think I'd ever be able to order one again. Now I will always think of acidy cum. Like,
Yeah. I mean, they kind of taste like that anyway. I don't really like a pina colada either.
So the other
Or
issue,
getting caught in the rain.
Well,
Sorry.
great news. You will not try to cheat accidentally, and then it will end up being your husband, and you'll both ignore the fact that you were both trying to cheat, and you'll just live happily ever after.
Is that what
That'll
that song
never
is about?
happen to you. That is what that song is about.
Oh, okay. I've just always been upset by the line that's like, if you're not into yoga, because I am into yoga. And I'm like, just because I like yoga doesn't mean I'm a bitch. Shut up. I didn't know that's what that song was about.
It is what that song
I thought it
is
was just about a guy who was like basically listing his Tinder date requirements.
Okay, so I have a couple of issues with the sex scenes in this book. I'm bringing it back.
I have
Hold
a
on.
lot of issues with the sex scenes in these books.
Well, so some of them
are hot.
Some of it, like Tessa Dare is 100% hit or miss. Like, it is like
Oh yeah.
fucking rolling the dice every time you
man.
hit a sex scene with her.
Like sometimes we'll read the really good one that made us think we liked Tessa Dare.
Yes.
But not today. Today we read this one
Yes.
instead.
Every single sexual experience in this book ended up like distracting me because she would talk about hips bucking whenever they were getting close or like
So
desperate.
much hip bucking. Like,
They're
how can
so-
these two stay on rhythm with each other when their hips are just like impossible to keep still?
Yes.
Like, they have zero motor function over their own hips.
It sounded like trying to give somebody oral while they were on a fucking bucking bronco. Like
Yeah.
like I feel like my teeth
yeah,
hurt
yeah.
thinking about like the fucking bucking going on in this book. And maybe, like, when they're writing this, other people are imagining, like, slider movements, like, just little desperate, like, hip movements. But I'm imagining bucking the way that it's used in the English, like, in the American colloquial context, which
I'm-
means bucking, like, bucking bronco. Like,
I'm even
I am
just-
imagining rodeo style, hold on for dear life, how many seconds can you make it? Well, she's flopping like a fish out of water on top.
I'm even just imagining, like, not like really slight movements, but like somewhere in between, just like a normal, like a medium wave hump. And I'm still like, I mean, just a barely wrong movement. Like, if you both go in at the same time, somebody's still gonna get like belly fat to the eyeball. You know what I mean? Like, you should, if the rhythm doesn't match, it's both not that good actually, and also like a little bit dangerous when we're talking oral or like a handy. So like, I would have expected a lot more of, ooh, ouch, you hit me in the face. Especially because that's kind of a thing in this book. Maddie is constantly accidentally hurting Logan in one way or another. Like in the one that I just read, he licks her clit and she hits him in the face with her leg because she's like, whoa, what was that? Why'd you lick me?
Yes.
And like, that never happens with the bucking. Instead, they're just both, like, super turned on by that. And it just makes the sex even better. And I'm like, I feel like usually you're supposed to, like, match tempo and the speed together instead of just make wild, jerky, frantic movements. Right?
Buck less, my friend. The sex will be better. Buck less. Buck less to fuck more. That's
Buck
the
less,
new
fuck more.
slogan for our show. Buck less, fuck more. So that's the number one thing that pulled me out of most of these sex scenes, because even when they use terms that I don't like, or they're doing something where I'm like, why is this teasing? Why is this, like, the whole stroking, like when she strokes her collarbone, like, nervously.
Yeah, he
like,
just is, like, so attracted to the fact that when she's nervous or anxious, she, like, takes her finger and, like, rubs back and forth on her own collarbone, and he just thinks that's the sexiest thing that he's ever fucking seen, because he wants to, like, lick her on the collarbone, which he never does.
Yeah.
If I were him, I would have licked that collarbone a long time ago.
Yes. I have to, oh my god. Sorry, I just read one of my own notes and it was upsetting. Yeah, no, there was one other, like, flirtatious / like foreplay scene that I just could not get past, which was during it was during the mutual masturbation scene, which is pre them having sex.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is sex, right? But it's just not penetrative sex.
It's pre-penetrative.
But they both, like,
pre-legally
They
binding.
both get naked. Yes, it's it is non-legally binding sex. So they both get naked and they're, like, staring intently at each other while they jerk off, and that's fine.
It was kind of hot.
But
that scene was kind of hot.
I actually thought that this was a good, like, a very well written scene. Like,
yeah,
it was like the tempo was good for me, and it felt like there was, like, so much tension in this moment. Like, emotionally, I was like, well done, Tessa Dare.
Yeah.
But there was one point that I just the whole book, I had to, like, put my bookmark in and walk away for a second because it grossed me out so bad. So it's like she's naked and she's with her fingertips is tracing the globe of her breast, is how this is written.
Oh, she
slowly circling her fingers around and around. And so then he grabs himself and he functionally starts slowly stroking himself. And the response for her is the jolt of arousal was immediate. Electric. The moment his hand closed around his rigid staff, her own breeding parts went soft and quivering. Breeding parts. I was like,
parts.
Like, I could not. And then it goes right back in. Perhaps she should have felt embarrassed. And to be truthful, she did a bit, but she couldn't look away. The visible proof of his arousal, the strength of his grip, which sounds like he's choking his own penis.
I know, it really does. It sounds like he's trying to squeeze it.
The tension in the sinews of his neck as he stroked up and down. She caused that, all of it. The surge of power was intoxicating. And the most thrilling way of all was the way he looked at her. Or rather, looked through her. I'm like, that feels insulting. Inside her. Well, he's got quite the view, doesn't he? Somewhere behind those eyes, he was making love to her in bold, passionate strokes. Which, like, okay, fine. I can imagine that, like, they're sitting there watching each other masturbate, pretending that, like, he's just having his merry way with her, and if that's what works, okay.
Yeah, like, I can get that.
And then she slowly moves her fingertip down, and he's like, yeah, do that, touch yourself. Oh, yeah. Like, which, you know what? The thing about this scene that was, like, really great was how full the, like, trust and consent and every piece of that was.
Yeah.
But there were so many weird, like, compared to their first sex scene when she, like, finally loses her virginity, when I first started to read it, it sounded like they were, like, up against the door, and I was like, damn, hot, man. And then the sex that they do have is really quick once it's penetrative.
It's pretty vanilla.
Like, the foreplay was great, but the sex itself was awful.
Oh, because when they have sex for the first, when they have penetrative, legally binding sex for the first time.
We are changing like P to V. No, you know what? I think any penetrative sex we should call legally binding sex, which means, ladies, if you want to, yes, you're right. Let's be inclusive. So folks with vaginas, if you want to have endless sex with folks with other vaginas, you absolutely can, and it will never be legally binding. Have as much.
Yeah, you'll have to find a way to consummate your marriage that's
I recommend strap-ons.
Yeah, that would be legally binding sex. If you're not into strap-ons, I'm sorry,
Yes.
it'll never be a real
Yeah,
marriage.
because fingers they're not penetrative
Fingers
enough.
don't do it. No, it's not penetrative.
Yeah.
They don't get up high enough. If you have a dildo, your partner's gonna have to hold it for you if that's okay. But that could work.
This was like one of the most, that is hilarious. We have to stop and recognize that the idea of your partner holding your dildo for you is legally binding is phenomenal.
That's yeah. That's the legally binding sex.
Yes.
It's a loophole. But no, so before they have legally binding sex, he actually finger blasts her and like gives her an orgasm, and she's like, that's not fair. And he really does say this. I'm sorry for that orgasm I just gave you. It's just gonna be less painful for you if you've already had your climax. And I don't think that's true.
Well, okay, so the piece of it that he's functionally trying to say is like, I need to get you to the point of fully aroused, and you're not fully aroused until you're like over, so that there's enough space in between and you're already like moving your muscles. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
It's true that it would be less painful for her if she were aroused, yeah. But
Yes.
like, he's like, no, it's just that it's not gonna hurt at all if you've already come once. And it's like,
Yes,
okay,
less painful. That's exactly
maybe.
what happens. He gives her oral. That's how he does it.
Oh, is it oral? Whatever.
Yeah, it's oral because he says, I mean to taste you. Try not to kick me in the head this time. And then she says, that's unfair. You wouldn't even let me touch you. And he said, it's better this way. The joining will go easier if you've already found your peak. I've no wish to hurt you.
He calls it the joining, like it's some sort of ritual.
It is. It's the legally binding act of becoming man and wife.
That's true. It is a legally binding
That's
act.
why nowadays they call marriages the joining of hands. It's a metaphor for when it's the consummation that makes the marriage. Just the first time, though. After that, fuck off.
Is that true? Are you lying to me?
I am absolutely
bullshitting me?
bullshitting, but it could
Okay.
100% be true. I have no fucking idea.
Okay, because I'm like, I'll believe you. Stop telling me lies.
I love this, like, ready, he asked, positioning himself on his elbows. Yes. Yes. When he pushes inside of her, it did hurt. Maddie had to bite her lip from crying out. Listen, sex fucking hurts. At first. With, like, losing your virginity hurts when you have a vagina. And he's like, he nudged her in deeper, impatient strokes. Also took me out of the moment because the idea of it being patient strokes, it felt almost clinical. Like, breathe through the pain, breathe through the pain. Okay, I pushed in a little bit more. Breathe through the pain, breathe through the pain.
Yeah,
like,
it feels like giving birth.
Yeah, in the reverse. And then, are you well? She nodded. He carefully withdrew a fraction, then pushed back in, reaching a new depth within her. They both groaned. You're so tight, he murmured, sounding concerned. So he was like, God, oh God, you're so tight. I don't know. And I think it's more that you're so big, she said. You don't need to worry. I'm fine. He went slowly at first, but slowly didn't last long. Soon, a more urgent rhythm took hold as his thrust increased in both speed and intensity. Like, he's like, I care so much. I'm so worried I'm hurting you. But God, this feels so good. Let me just wreck you.
But that is always how these scenes go. Like, every time there's a scene where the woman is losing her virginity in one of these books, it's like she actually does feel pain, and he's all like, I really don't want to hurt you, but I'm not going to be able to stop, so I'm really sorry about that. And so then she sits there and she experiences pain, and then he's like, are you hurt? And she's like, no, it's okay, keep going, it's fine. And it's just like,
I need you to be done with this as quickly as possible. Do not slow down, do not talk to anybody, do not pass go, do not collect $200.
But then they'll explain, like, there was a little bit of pain, but then she got over it surprisingly fast, and also had 3 orgasms at the same time, and it was the best sex she'd ever had or ever would have from then on.
This was the nice part. She did not orgasm during this marriage ritual.
No, but she'd already orgasmed, so it's fine.
She already orgasmed. She got her kicks in early, but she... like the perspective switches to her, and she's like, his passion took her breath away. She would be damned before she asked him to stop. She loved feeling how much he wanted her. Like, it became a weird observational scene again. And then she wraps her legs around his hips and clung to his shoulders, holding him as tight as she could. He reached a point where there were no words. He braced himself on one elbow and slipped the other arm underneath her waist, drawing her body tight to his. When he thrust, his cock reached a place so deep inside her that she felt him everywhere. Everywhere's in italics, just so you get the full experience. And if you just got chills up the back of your neck, I'm sorry. After a few final thrusts, he shuddered and groaned. He slumped atop her and buried his face in her neck. She put her arms around his shoulders, hugging him close. They laid there just breathing. Her heart had never been so full. I did not feel that way after my first sexual experience. I will just say that.
There was a lot of being upset about how much blood there was on that mattress, and there was a lot of like, oh God, I'm so sorry. Not a lot of, I'm cuddling you and my heart has never been so full.
Yes, yeah, I did not feel full. I felt empty, and, like, I don't mean that literally. I mean, like, especially women in period pieces, your entire worth is defined by your virtue, and, like, they just went through 2 weeks of her being like, I don't even know you. Do I want to fuck you or do I not want to fuck you? And, like, her potentially ruining herself for him, like, all of this, and I just can't imagine she would be like, my heart is so full.
Well, I mean, when they get to the point where they actually do have sex in this book, it is after a lot of the turmoil of, no, I think I actually do love you, even though our relationship is complicated and based on blackmail. I've gotten to know you over the last 2 weeks, and yeah, I'll absolutely be married to you for the rest of my life and also give you all of my land so that you can let your 5 war-torn brethren live upon the land and take care of each other.
The one thing that I did actually end up really liking about this book was, like, the weird little comments that were, like, super humorous. Like, I felt like that was actually where they added the most personality in with the various characters, was the way in which Tessa Dare wrote their humor. So, like, Maddie, every time she writes to her Captain Mackenzie, she functionally writes a different name to him each time. So, dear Captain, not a real Captain Mackenzie, dear Captain McWhimsy.
Captain McWhimsy,
dear
yeah.
Captain McFantasy, imaginary McFigment. That one was my favorite. Logan, surely we can be at each other's Christian names by now. My dear silent friend, captain of my heart's dearest folly. And then throughout the book, she calls him Captain McSurly, Captain McEnvy, Captain McFlouncy, Captain McSleepy, and Captain McJackass. And after they consummate their marriage, he calls her Mrs.
Mrs. McHasty. Mrs. McHasty. Yeah.
Yes. But I deeply enjoyed that, and then, like,
yeah, that was really cute. I will also say, because we shit on the sex scenes a lot there for a second, I will say that I was kind of impressed by how much communication they had throughout all of their sex scenes. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of the times when we read these ones, I feel like they just read each other's minds. or both magically enjoy the same things, so that whatever the other person tries, they're just immediately into it. They're just that horny for each other.
I feel like they always end up writing it in a way where it's like, this shouldn't happen. We shouldn't just know each other this well, but it's like but we were meant to be.
Yeah, but in this one, he will say, yeah, do that, or faster, or harder, or like, she'll say,
or I'm just touching.
Yeah.
Or
please kiss me, or please kiss me there. Like, they'll actually talk to each other and guide each other through it, like the way you have to do in normal sex in real life. And I kind of appreciated that. It was like, yeah, that's actually like, that makes this more realistic.
Yes.
What didn't make this realistic is that she was still like a master sex wizard her first time trying literally anything. And they kept trying to explain it as like he hadn't lain with a woman in 45 years. And so he was just so horny that she could have touched him on his nose and he would have come immediately.
Yeah. Well, and there was like a paragraph when she's giving him oral that he's like, she wasn't experienced, but her enthusiasm made up for it. And the imagery that caused was like a lot
just so enthusiastic, like a lot of that kind of like bug-eyed, that kind of bug-eyed BJ that you're like, well, I'm not gonna look at your face, I'm just gonna enjoy what's happening.
Yes, that was one of those moments.
The other thing is that they always talk about like she bites her lips not to cry out, and it's like, girl, cry out. You're like, everybody knows what you're doing up there. Everybody's been hoping you guys would fucking get it over with since the day you got fake married. So like, just get into it. Do a little screaming. Do a little pretend screaming. Put them on edge. Make them think you're fucking. Jesus.
Throw out a couple, is it in yet? Just give him a run for his money.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 5 stars, what did you give this romance?
Like, overall?
Yes.
Like a 2.
What did you give the sex scenes?
Like a 3. They're like okay. Like a 3 or a 4. No, like a 3. They're pretty middle of the road.
A 3. I would say that too. The one thing that I did appreciate about this book was that there wasn't any going in dry sex.
Like, no going in dry. There was definitely a lot of foreplay.
And the foreplay was the best part of the sex, in my opinion.
I'll give the foreplay a 4.
Yeah.
And sorry, that's not a joke. I'll give the foreplay a 4 though. And I'll give the sex a 3. Because like the foreplay was pretty solid and there was a variety. But it was all pretty vanilla. But the sex was like in, thrust, done, out, cuddle. It was just fine, not that exciting. It was written better than a lot that I've read before, but not like the sex itself wasn't the hot part. It was the foreplay.
Yeah, I have to say this was my least favorite Tessa Dare novel. And that included, there was one that we read where like halfway through the book, all of the side characters just were never mentioned again. Like, they just fucking got written out.
That happened in this book, too. Because Aunt Thea goes back home to tell the family that Maddie got married to her long-lost, presumably dead sweetheart, and she never comes back.
But that's the last day of the book.
Yes, it is.
It's the last day of the book. Yes, it is.
It's before she goes. No, it's like no. Okay, because she was going to leave after Beltane. Okay, they have the big party. She's gonna leave that night. She decides not to because they fucking get married. So Aunt Thea leaves. But then there's that whole plot at the very end of the book where they're already married, but that guy comes over and he wants her to go all the way to like Guam or whatever. And there's a whole 2-week period where she's like gonna leave, and she does leave, and she goes to Edinburgh.
But she's only gone for a week.
But Aunt Thea has been gone for a week and a day.
But she had to go all the way back to England. There's no point in her just coming back.
But Aunt Thea she's not in the prologue.
Mm-mm.
They never message her to be like, Madeline is gonna go away for 6 fucking months. Like, they don't even tell her that. Aunt Thea went to go get the family to come stay for the summer, and they don't even bother telling her, hey, don't send the family because I'm gonna go away for 6 months. So that happens too. Aunt Thea just like disappears, and they write her out in one sentence.
I sent her forward to get the family. They'll come to visit us in the summer.
Yeah, they write her off in one sentence, and then she's not in the prologue even. Or, I'm sorry, the epilogue.
Yeah.
She's not in the epilogue at all. So there's definitely, like...
They're on their little honeymoon, and they're gonna have a baby in the epilogue. They don't mention any of the men. They don't mention anybody in the epilogue.
Like, they don't mention whether or not, like, the one whose mental health has been super bad, but it's getting better slowly over time. They don't mention if Grant is okay. They don't mention if the one who they teased might get married to one of the other, like, not even named side characters gets married.
I feel like that was gonna be the next in the series or something. Like, that's what that was set up to be.
Maybe, but I don't know how he would have gotten his own castle, because all of the ones in this series are just unrelated characters who get their own castle.
Well, maybe there's a worn-torn man who's yeah. I don't know. I think that this book is hilarious. It's awful. It's absolutely terrible. I appreciate that we did this. I'm so proud of us for starting. We can only get better, right?
Uh-huh. It's all uphill from here.
Perfect.
Sure.
There's nothing that I love more than hills. Except for consensual sex. And reading terrible romance novels. I love romance.
Humping finger guns is my favorite, so... Well... Thanks for listening, everybody. We love you, but not that way. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Hey, present day Dolly and Jolene here. Thanks for popping our cherry.
Wow, Jolene, that audio was rough.
I bet in about 9 episodes, it's gonna get way better.
Yeah, it just takes practice.
Find us on Instagram at Womanly Portal Podcast.
Or email us at womanlyportalpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks go out to Chloe Watts for our music.
A special thanks to C Mann for editing this hot garbage.
Dolly, did we even talk about that time they fucked in the mud?